The Afghan Air Force is the aerial warfare branch of the Afghan Armed Forces. It is divided into 4 wings, with the first wing at Kabul, the second wing at Kandahar, the third wing at Shindon, and the fourth wing at Mazar-i-Sharif in northern Afghanistan. Lieutenant Gen. Muhammad Davran has served as Chief of Staff of the Afghan Air Force and Gen. Abdul Fahim Rahman as the Afghan Air Force Commander. The command center of the Afghan Air Force is located at Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. The Shindon Air Base in Herat Province serves as the main training facility. The Royal Afghan Air Force was established in 1919 under the reign of King Amanullah and significantly modernized by King Zahir Shah in the 1960s. During the 1980s, the Soviet Union built up the Afghan Air Force, first in an attempt to defeat the Mujahideen and in hopes that strong Afghan air power would preserve the pro-Soviet government of Najibullah. The Afghan Air Force had over 400 aircraft, including more than 200 Soviet-made fighter jets. The collapse of Najibullah's government in 1992 and the continuation of a civil war throughout the 1990s reduced the number of Afghan aircraft to less than a dozen. During Operation Enduring Freedom in late 2001, in which the Taliban government was ousted from power, all that remained of the AAF was a few helicopters. Since 2007, the NATO Combined Air Power Transition Force, which was renamed the NATO Air Training Command Afghanistan in 2010, has worked to rebuild and modernize the Afghan Air Force. The CAPTF NATCA serves as the air component of the NATO Combined Security Transition Command Afghanistan, which is responsible for rebuilding the Afghan armed forces. The AAF currently has about 183 aircraft and over 7,000 airmen. The Resolute Support Mission wants to raise the ranks of the AAF to 8,000 airmen and increase the number of aircraft, which are progressively getting more advanced. The Afghan Air Force was established on 19 August 1919. In 1924 and 1925 it saw action when it fought against the Khost Rebellion. As early as 1921, the Soviet Union and United Kingdom provided a small number of aircraft to Afghanistan's King Amanullah Khan, who had been impressed with the British use of aircraft against his government in 1919 during the Third Anglo-Afghan War. However, they were not made into a separate air arm until 1924. For the next decade, Soviet pilots performed the bulk of the flying and equipping for the AAF. Probably about one-half of the aircraft were Polikarpov R-1s, a Soviet copy of the de Havilland DH-9A. Most AAF aircraft were destroyed in the Civil War that began in December 1928. And it was not before 1937 that a serious rebuilding effort began. From the late 1930s until World War II, British Hawker Hind and Italian Amam RO.37 aircraft constituted the bulk of the Afghan Air Force, which by 1938 amounted to about 30 planes in service. The Hawker Hind remained in the Afghan inventory until 1957. And as of 2009, one former Afghan Air Force Hawker Hind still flew in the Shuttleworth collection. In 1947, the Air Force was redesignated the Royal Afghan Air Force, a title it retained until further political upheaval in 1973. By 1960, the Royal Afghan Air Force consisted of approximately 100 combat aircraft including MiG-15 fighters, Il-28 light bombers, transports, and a few helicopters. Also by that time, a small number of Afghan pilots were undergoing undergraduate pilot training in the United States, while others attended training in the Soviet Union, India, and several European countries. In the bloodless 1973 Sur Revolution, King Zahir Shah was deposed and Muhammad Daud Khan became the country's president. During his 5 years in power, until the communist coup of 1978, Daud gained Soviet assistance to upgrade the capabilities and increase the size of the Afghan Air Force, introducing newer models of Soviet MiG-21 fighters and An-24 and An-26 transports. In 1979, the Air Force lost 4 Mi-8s. Improvements in the early to mid-1970s notwithstanding, The Afghan Air Force remained relatively small until after the 1979-80 Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. While the Afghan Air Force was equipped with a large inventory, probably some 400 aircraft in the mid-1980s, many of them were manned and maintained by advisors from Czechoslovakia and Cuba. In many cases, the Soviets were reluctant to entrust Afghan pilots with either the latest aircraft models or high-priority missions, and, indeed, a number of Afghan pilots were equally reluctant to conduct airstrikes against their countrymen. The Afghan Air Force was at its strongest in the 1980s and early 1990s, producing some concern on the part of neighboring countries. The Air Force had at least 7,000 personnel plus 5,000 foreign advisors. At its peak, the Air Force had at least 240 fixed-wing combat aircraft, 150 helicopters, and perhaps 40 or more Antonov transports of various models. Midway through the Soviet-Afghan War, one estimate of Afghan